Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to David's Den. I'm David, and I make videos about Stephen King, his novels, his short stories, and any adaptations that were made for film or television. Today, we've gotten to the 5th episode in this night shift movie-ish vlog. Because it's not a movie, Strawberry Spring is the first ever podcast adaptation of a Stephen King work, and it is the short story of the same name that appears in the Night Shift short story collection published in 1978. Now, I'm going to assume that if you're here for episode 5, Snow Angels, you are caught up with episodes 1 through 4, and let this be a spoiler warning for all things Strawberry Spring podcast through the end of episode 5, and for the short story all the way to the end, because we're going to be lining up and comparing how the adaptation fits to the source material. And if you're not caught up, make sure you check out the previous vlogs on the previous episodes, and here we go. Oh, and I decided to wear a nice pink shirt in honor of Strawberry Spring, because minus the fog, it kind of feels like that right now. It's like 63 degrees outside, and yesterday it was like a high of 30. I don't understand what's happening with the weather. So we start episode 5, Snow Angels. It's 1976. The captain calls, says, Anne is here. I want to see the two of you, because remember, Spring Heel Jack is back, and we know from episode 2 when Henry, as the author of the book on Spring Heel Jack, went to the rally to talk to the Chief Spencer. He says, I called Anne. She's this big journalist in Boston. They haven't spoken since the book had been published that he wrote. And there's the sense that there's some bad blood. So we know that history already from episode 2. The captain calls and says, Anne is now here, please come in. To which he's thinking, I can't believe he called Anne. I haven't seen her since graduation. We just kind of get a brief recap of that information because it's 3 episodes later. And we haven't thought about Anne in present day yet. We've been spending most of our time in 1968. This episode, I'll say, is probably evenly split, if not a little more heavy-handed on the 1976 storyline, which means we're not having as much correlation to the original short story because this is what's completely being fleshed out. And in fact, we know from the short story, Anne Bray's supposed to be dead. I mean, Henry doesn't work for the paper anyway in the short story. However, we can see Chelsea, who worked at the paper and was a friend of theirs, as a stand-in for Anne, the editor of the paper, in the short story. I don't mind it as a change to flesh out the story. We still get people who are dying at the right time in the right ways. So a pregnant Rachel is saying, I'm so sorry I got jealous last night. I have to go to the police station. That fucking Anne is back. Suddenly it's up in arms, exactly a mirroring of the conversation we heard in the last podcast in the dorm room when she says, can go to Anne then, when he wanted to call his editor at the paper to tell her about a story that was breaking. Because remember, they saw the crime. They saw the crime scene, rather, when they were out making Snow Angels. But that's the title of this episode, and that confused me. But it's going to make sense by the end. He has a little fight with Rachel, and then he says, thinking about the blood in his car and the note that he was just left by Spring Heel Jack about getting reacquainted. We talked about that in depth in the last vlog. He says, my car's dead. I need to borrow your car. Oh, fine. Just take me to the office. So he's thinking, I don't know what I'm going to do. Maybe I'm going to call the police. Maybe I'm not. Let me see what happens when I get there. I just don't want to be driving this crime scene through the town. So he takes a blanket or something. He was talking like this, and then suddenly I grabbed it, and the volume just dropped out, and he mumbled. So I think it's a blanket of some sort, but that also doesn't make sense. And he covers the area of the car with blood. Hoping that he's not messing up any fingerprints when he does turn this over as evidence. Rachel's giving him the silent treatment in the car, and I love this dialogue. He's thinking, where is it? Where are my notes? He's thinking about their past from the college all the way up to now, and he says, Spring Heel Jack was a shadow over our entire relationship. I love this line. There can be no shadow without light, and Rachel is my light. That's not word for word, but is there a cat? Oh no, I thought there was a cat tickling my leg, but it was just the microphone cord. So it's not word for word. It's Rachel was that light for me or something along those lines. But I love that sentiment, which we heard, at the beginning of the last podcast. I cannot let him get to Rachel or my unborn child. So we have this driving force of wanting to do good and do right, but also having a sense of responsibility to helping track down this killer, since he wrote all the newspaper articles on it, 8 years ago, and the literal book since. So he gets to the police station. I love that there's this idea of the smell and sense memory when you smell something. And he's thinking he hasn't been there, and thank God he hasn't had a reason to be in the police station since Spring Hill Jack 8 years earlier. He sees Anne through the office window as he approaches Chief Spencer's office, and he has to stop and collect himself for a moment. He's like, I haven't seen her since I told her I sold the book. And now she's smiling and happy, and she wasn't smiling then. So we have a little bit more hint that there's a rift because of whatever happened with the book and selling the stories. And I also wonder, did he write an actual book, or is it just a collection of the newspaper articles? No, I'm pretty sure he wrote a book afterwards from other things that are said. But he has the thought, she grew into this beautiful woman. This is not the awkward, nerdy editor that I knew, even though he did try to ask her out back then, and then she turned him down, and then she hit on him later. I don't know what they're trying to do with the romance element, because there is no romance between them, but there is a spark of some sort of chemistry between them, and it's not very well defined. But I also don't think it needs to be for this story, unless they're actually going to have an affair sometime in the last 3 episodes. And then I think that it's perfectly justified. They have set it up that might happen. But Captain Spencer says, you two, you have blood on your hands. You literally, Henry, because you made money off of this story. Basically what he's saying is, I need your help because we are now going to avenge my daughter. And he's like, all of the police around here that you see, they're all new. They never knew Chelsea. You guys did. It's actually very, very touching. But he in the process also accuses them of meddling to get the story the first time around and getting in the way of the investigation. So he's kind of, calling in the you owe me card. And they asked, do you have any suspects? And I do remember John Dancy. He found the very first victim. I thought you ruled him out. After he graduated college, he was drafted for the Vietnam War, and then he was dishonorably discharged for violence, conduct unbecoming an officer. Now he's back and the killings have started. So Chief Spencer wants to go after him again. Also, while they're there in Chief Spencer's office, he's waving around a crime scene photo, and they can see it's presumably an exact replica of a crime scene photo or something that happened in 1968 that says, no, this is Spring Hill Jack. He did the same thing again, which we're going to find out later, because at this point it says, a picture with a box and a letter that's torn, half of a torn letter. We're going, wait a minute. This hasn't happened. That's not in the short story, and that hasn't happened in the podcast yet. Why is this sparking a memory for these characters, right? Well, before we get any answer, Anne and Henry go to the grinder. They have a little catch-up, and basically says, let's clear the air. You screwed me over. And he's like, yeah, I know. But if it's any consolation, I got writer's block. I had to become a teacher. Those who can do, those who can't teach. And my relationship has suffered because of it. But, now I'm going to be a dad, and things are okay with Rachel. Although we know they had a fight this morning, and he's literally driving her car to hide the fact that Spring Hill Jack used his at a crime scene the night before. But after they have this little catch up and discussion about the book, Henry asks Anne, wasn't Chief Spencer acting a little crazy, maybe a little too gung-ho about all this? Yeah, but his daughter, agitated, that's the word that he used. Doesn't he seem a little overly agitated to you? Yeah, but his daughter, I remember it like it was yesterday. Boom. Of course, obvious transition. We get things like that, which I would roll my eyes at as being hokey in any other medium, but given that we have no visual, not even a break on the page to indicate that something's different, I don't mind it so much. Henry is walking into his office at the newspaper. There's a box that was delivered for him. It's a brown cardboard shoebox. As he picks it up, he realizes it's wet, and oh shit, that's blood dripping from under the box onto my pants. There's a half-torn letter, the left half of a letter, and in the box is a left hand. And in the voiceover we get, little did we know, Chief Spencer was receiving the matching delivery. So he had the box with the right half of the letter and the right hand. In obvious message, they say the right hand doesn't know what the left hand is doing. And, well, let's just say that Anne recognizes the ring, and they immediately know it's Chelsea's hand. So this guy literally sent the chief of, well, I guess captain at the time, his own daughter's hand. And when they finally find the body, because it had been, buried under snow, she had made snow angels, which means, and Henry realizes, he was watching, Spring-Heeled Jack was watching Henry and Rachel the night before in episode 4 making snow angels. Shouldn't this episode then have been titled Snow Angel singular, since only one snow angel is made, when in the previous episode it was Snow Angels? I still don't understand the naming of the episodes quite. Yeah, I still don't think that Drive Slow, Walk Fast had anything to do with episode 4. But Snow Angels, if it were singular to Snow Angel, is a perfect title for this. They're saying that she was made to do it after her hands were cut off because you could see the bloody wings, right? She was bleeding in the snow. And of course, like all the others, she's been decapitated. And sending these letters just like the Zodiac. And I had teased and then forgot to mention in the last vlog, he left the message, the haha, in the short story, and Catch Me If You Can in the podcast on the windshield of Adele Perkins's car. What I meant to then bring up again is the letter that he sends to Henry at the end of episode 4 mirrors the Zodiac sending letters to the newspapers and taunting the police in real life. Well, now here we are getting it again. He's sending half of the message to the paper and half of the message to the police station, taunting the father of the person who was killed, not just the detective who's investigating the crime. All of this is made up. All of this is embellished. None of it is in the original short story. I'm here for it, though. I think that they have earned it. They paid so much respect and homage to the original short story and given it so much love. They could embellish as much as they want from here on out, I think, especially if we're talking about the 1976 timeline. This is the 1968 timeline, but it directly reflects what's happening in 1976. So the captain having to find some sort of closure in his daughter's death and being taunted basically goes on the rampage, goes on the warpath. He focuses on John Dancy, the guy who found the first victim. While we on this vlog and the podcast itself has already talked about his discharge from the armed services, what we're learning here is back in 1968, he becomes the prime person of interest because it turns out he knew all 3 of the victims. And now it's set up that Spencer is going to go after him and any sort of collateral damage that may happen. We don't get any more of that plot line in this episode, and I'm excited to see where it goes and how it's going to blow up in his face in both timelines moving forward, because it's pretty obvious it's not Dancy. Henry's listening to the morning show as he's waking up, and Kevin's voice breaks through, and this time it's obvious. Hey, I'm being a radio DJ. Hey, Henry, I'm talking to you. The police are going to be everywhere right now. Be careful. And then the radio show just keeps going on. Whoo! And I'm definitely sleep deprived. I was up all night with Anne talking about Adele Perkins. Okay, I'm just hallucinating. I think that we know he's not, especially because now it ties into Kevin's voice coming through the radio in present day 1976, which happened in episode 3 and threw us off for a second, and now is completely justified. Henry has nothing going on that day. He says he holds kind of a solo memorial, getting drunk in his dorm room for Chelsea. Anne calls him and says they found the head. As the snow thawed, it was revealed. It was placed right in front of the dean's office, and you could see it from the window as the snow melted. Anne tells him that they found a note with the head that says, "Everyone wants to go to heaven, but no one wants to die." Kind of cryptic. We don't have anything that is drawing us back to that sentiment at the moment. So I'm curious to see what that sets up. There has not been any sort of religious overtone or any talk of heaven or hell yet in the podcast, either by Spring-Heeled Jack in his notes or by our cast of characters. So it's interesting to wonder why that note was left. Oh, and we also find out that the police got and then roughed up John Dancy a little bit. Now we're back in the present, 1976. Anne and Henry are finishing up at the grinder, and Henry gets this idea and proposes to Anne, hey, why don't we write the next book together? This might actually be an opportunity for us. Which goes back to the very first episode. And my God, I thought of it and I should have listened to it again to find the exact right wording, and I didn't. He says something when they hear about the first murder, little did I know that this was going to do a world of good for my career. It's that one great story that they were talking about at the beginning of the episode.
One song, glory. One song before I go, glory.
It was at episode 4. When did I sing One Song Glory? Was that this video or the last video? I'm recording them back to back on the same day. So to me, it was only like 30 minutes ago. So Henry showed Anne the note that Spring Heel Jack left to him that morning. And it is the exact opposite of what happened in 1968. Now, Anne is saying this is evidence, you have to go to the police. And Henry's saying, but Anne, this is our way in. I'll make you a deal. We remember where the head was found by the dean's office. Why don't we go looking for it? And then in the morning, based on whatever we find, I'll tell the cops about this evidence in my car and this note. So they go walking around. We don't get a lot of that really obvious dialogue we got in the very first few episodes of the, where is everyone? I can't see a thing. We do get Anne going, my God, I can't see anything, but it's during their conversation, and then she trips and she stumbles, and just the top poking out through the snow is the head of the girl that was killed the night before in 1976. Whew. And the end of it is right after that happens, and Anne trips and they realize it's the head. Henry just thinks, I know Spring Heel Jack is watching me now. And in fact, in the 8 years since this started, I'm not sure he ever stopped watching me or went away, or what did he say? I'm worried he never stopped. Much more concise and beautiful way of saying the same thing, but that was the actual dialogue. I'm worried he never stopped. So I think all those bits and pieces that keep us as the audience member one step ahead, ignoring the end of the short story as if we didn't know it, going, something's not right with this guy's psychosis. Why is Kevin talking to him through the radio? Why is he not remembering the fog? Now our protagonist, I think, might be starting to get clued in, and it's really exciting. But we have 3 episodes left before the podcast is over. I'll be getting to episode 6 in the next day or 2, and I will see you guys then. Make sure you hit like, share, subscribe if you want to follow me on social media. That, along with Patreon if you want to support the channel. All those links are down below. See you then.